I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. I just slid the 1923 water rights deed across the table and watched 35 McMansions turn into lakefront property. The Willowbrook Estates HOA thought they could steal my grandfather's farm while I was deployed in Afghanistan. These pompous bureaucrats built their perfect suburban paradise on stolen land, complete with tennis outfit Karens patrolling in golf carts. What they didn't know? I'm an Army Corps engineer. That little earth dam on my property had been waiting 45 years for someone stupid enough to build downstream. The audacity was truly something to behold, until the spillway gates opened, and their luxury development got its first taste of natural flooding. All this was going to be satisfying. Have you ever dealt with an HOA or a neighbor who thought they were above the law? Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, because you're about to witness the most beautiful HOA takedown involving federal water law and gravity. And before we unleash the floodgates, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. You do not want to miss how one engineer used a 100-year-old deed to bankrupt a corrupt city councilman. Let's get into it. Let me introduce you to Jake Morrison. That's me, 34 years old, Army Corps of Engineers, and the third-generation owner of 47 acres of prime Texas land just outside Austin. My grandfather, who we all called Pops, bought this property back in 1955. Pops was the kind of man who believed in taking care of the land. In 1978, he built a small earth dam on our property. It wasn't fancy, just good. Engineering designed to collect rainwater for the cattle and help out our downstream neighbors during dry spells. Pops always said that someday the back 40 acres would be worth something special. Then came my 2 tours in Afghanistan. I specialized in water management and infrastructure. Turns out, building wells in a war zone teaches you a thing or two about how precious clean water is and how quickly people will fight over it. While I was on my second deployment, Pops passed away. The property went into a trust managed by my sister Sarah. She lives in California and knows about as much about Texas land law as I know about surfing. She hired a management company. Taxes got paid, but she never looked at the assessment. Big mistake. I came home in August 2023, ready to finally spend some real time on Pops's land. I drove down that familiar gravel road expecting to see rolling pastures. Instead, I found concrete trucks, bulldozers, and survey stakes scattered across my land like a suburban invasion. I marched up to the construction foreman. "Sorry, buddy," he said, not looking sorry at all. "We got permits. This is Willowbrook Estates property now." I called the police. Officer Martinez showed up and explained, with obvious discomfort, that the HOA had filed an adverse possession claim while I was overseas. It's an old law designed to prevent land from sitting empty, but it's become a favorite tool for developers to steal land they don't own. That's when Maggie appeared. Margaret Maggie Thornwell, 52 years old, president of the HOA. She drives a white BMW X7 and treats tennis outfits like business attire. Maggie is married to City Councilman Rick Thornwell, which tells you exactly how she gets her permits approved. She rolled up in her golf cart, smiling that fake Southern smile. "Your family abandoned this land, honey," she said. "We're just putting it to good use for the community." But here's what really got my blood boiling. I discovered her crews had diverted the creek that fed Pops's dam. The water level was dropping every single day. They were stealing 45 years of careful water management. As I stood there, Maggie gave me her parting shot. "You should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy." That's when I knew. This wasn't just a property dispute, it was war. I hired a lawyer who quoted me $85,000 just to challenge the zoning. I fired him immediately. Instead, I fell back on my training. While Maggie's husband Rick was fast-tracking emergency zoning changes, I was digging through county records like I was hunting for intel. And just like in the military, the devil was in the details. I found Pops's original 1978 dam construction permits. He didn't just build it himself. He worked directly with the Army Corps of Engineers for flood control. Knowledge nugget number 1. Any dam built with federal guidance creates federal jurisdiction that a local HOA cannot override. Period. But wait, it gets better. Buried in the 1923 archives, I found a water rights deed. My great-grandfather purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed. These rights were older than the city, older than the county, and definitely older than Maggie's McMansions. They weren't just stealing my land, they were stealing my water. Maggie sensed I was fighting back, so she went nuclear. She organized a neighborhood safety patrol, 3 board members in polo, shirts parked at my gate, photographing every visitor. Then came the coordinated attack. Rick used his council position to send a regulatory SWAT team to my house. The building inspector, fire marshal, health department, and animal control all showed up on the same day. They fined me $8,000 for unsightly structures regarding my farmhouse that had stood since 1962. They cited me for environmental hazards on a septic system that had passed inspection 6 months ago. It was a squeeze play. Overwhelm the target with paperwork until they surrender. But the lowest blow? Rick ordered a wellness check on me through Veteran Services. He claimed I was a troubled veteran, struggling with readjustment. A social worker showed up at my door, apologetic, but required to check boxes on her clipboard. I looked past her shoulder and saw Maggie watching from her golf cart, sipping an iced tea, smiling like she was supervising a military inspection. That night I called my old Army buddy, Tony Riggs. Tony now works for the EPA Enforcement Division. I told him about the creek diversion. Tony went quiet for a second, then said, "Jake, if they diverted a natural waterway without a federal permit, that's a Clean Water Act violation. And if your dam has federal jurisdiction, the fines start at $50,000 per day." I started building my own coalition. I met with Miguel Santos, a downstream farmer whose family had been here since 1887. Since the HOA stole the creek water, his crops were dying. I met Mrs. Chen, whose ancestral garden had withered away. Together with an environmental lawyer named Amanda Cross, we found the smoking gun. The HOA's entire development was built in a 100-year floodplain. Insurance companies had initially refused coverage, so Maggie and Rick lied. They claimed they had permanently diverted the creek to remove the flood risk. Knowledge nugget number 2. Lying about flood risks to get insurance. Coverage isn't just a policy violation. It's federal mail fraud. It carries mandatory prison time. But the engineering reality was even worse. The HOA had built 5 luxury homes directly in the historical flood channel. They installed decorative dry creek beds, pretty stones and concrete. That looked nice, but weren't designed to handle actual water flow. Meanwhile, Pops's dam had a functional emergency spillway system with hydraulic gates that hadn't been opened since '92. Then Maggie made her biggest mistake. Her crew began installing permanent concrete barriers to completely block the original creek bed. This would make my spillway useless and permanently destroy the downstream ecosystem. The Weather Service predicted heavy September rains in 48 hours. It was the perfect cover for emergency dam maintenance. I wasn't going to flood them out of spite. I was going to perform a controlled release to demonstrate natural flow patterns. If I didn't open the gates, the dam might burst naturally. If I did open them, the water would flow exactly where nature intended, which happened to be right through their new subdivision. Maggie panicked. She hired private security, tactical gear, wannabes, to patrol my property perimeter at night. My trail cameras caught them red-handed at 2:00 a.m., trying to jam concrete mix into my hydraulic lines. I called the sheriff. Deputy Rodriguez was waiting in the shadows, watching Mr. Tactical. Vest tried to explain why he was carrying quickset concrete at 2 a.m. Was the first laugh I'd had in weeks. With the sabotage failed, Rick fast-tracked an emergency restraining order for 6 Amiawam the next morning, but I was one step ahead. I had the 1978 covenant, which legally obligated me to maintain flow for downstream agriculture. At 7:02 a.m., with federal EPA agents on site and the morning sun painting the sky orange, I opened the spillway gates to 25% capacity. It wasn't a tsunami. It was magnificent. It wasn't the violent rush of destruction Maggie warned about. It was the gentle whisper of water returning home. For the first time in 18 months, Willow Creek flowed in its original bed. But down in Willowbrook Estates, it was chaos. Maggie was live streaming on Facebook, screaming, "He's flooding our children's homes. Arrest the terrorist." Rick Thornwell, in a panic, sent 3 concrete trucks to the edge of the property to try and dump their loads and block the water. Federal agents intercepted them immediately. The drivers were arrested on the spot. Interfering with a federal environmental investigation is a felony. Here's the beauty of it. The water didn't flood the houses. It filled the decorative creek beds. It flowed right past the backyards, staying perfectly within the natural banks my grandfather knew about. It proved that if the HOA hadn't blocked the creek, there never would have been a danger. The local news crew was there. Maggie grabbed the reporter, shrieking, "This veteran is using military training to attack civilians." The reporter, looking at the calm water flowing safely through the creek bed, asked the question that ended her career. "Ma'am, the water is flowing in the original creek bed. How exactly is this an attack?" Downstream, Miguel Santos knelt by the creek and washed his face in the fresh water. Mrs. Chen's garden irrigation system filled up. The community cheered. We hadn't destroyed anything. We had restored everything. The fallout was swift and brutal. We ended up in federal court. Maggie arrived in a black dress, playing the victim, claiming $2.7 million in damages. But Amanda cross-played the audio recording of Rick Thornwell, screaming about destroying property values, proving he knew the development was a fraud. Then the EPA testified. They confirmed the HOA had violated 3 federal laws, committed insurance fraud, and destroyed protected wildlife habitats. The judge looked at Rick and said, "This court will not obstruct lawful federal environmental enforcement." The result? Rick Thornwell pleaded guilty to conspiracy and is serving 3 years in federal prison. Maggie faced $8.7 million in civil penalties. She filed for personal bankruptcy, and the BMW is gone. The construction company paid $12 million in EPA fines. As for me, the insurance investigation revealed the fraud, and I received a whistleblower settlement of $340,000. I used that money to buy Miguel's family, farm at a tax auction, and returned it to him, debt-free. My property is now a federally designated environmental stewardship site. We turned the creek into an ecotourism spot. The water flows free, the bays are back, and kids swim where McMansions were supposed to stand. Every Sunday I visit Pops's grave with a mason jar of creek water. I tell him, "The creek's singing again, Pops, just like you said it would. Sometimes you have to flood the valley to save the creek. But you don't do it alone. You do it with documentation, federal law, and neighbors who have your back. If you're fighting a corrupt HOA, never give up. The law is often on your side if you dig deep enough." If you enjoyed this story of justice flowing downhill, hit that like button and subscribe. Next week, I'm telling you about the city that tried to steal my neighbor's solar farm, so she cut power to City Hall during the mayor's wedding reception. You do not want to miss that. Willow Creek flows free, y'all, and it always will.